You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
Go single! Thomas nuts!
ITG.
You know, folks there in West Virginia, they believe in God, country, family, and Mountaineer football, and not necessarily in that order.
There will be a product on the field that will match the fans that we have.
Come on across the Star City Bridge and on up the hill.
You're in the right place. You are in the gun.
Because once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 156 here of your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wesley Euler. I got the signal caller, Jed Drenning, here as we are a duo today on the show. But I tell you what, some things remain the same here on ITG. And, of course, one of those is that this episode is brought to you in part by our friends at BetOnline, where the game starts. A little spring ball update for you here. Some interesting news and notes that have come out of practices in the last week. Also looking ahead to the spring game, which is, of course, next Saturday, April 27th. So plenty to get to there. We've also got some big news here with the baseball team as well, too. Some good moving and shaking happening there on the diamond for the Mountaineers. So we'll get to all of that in this edition of ITG. Another thank you to our friend JR and all of our friends at Toothman Ford. We all know cars cost less in Grafton, and make sure you're supporting those who support us, who support our athletes, and Toothman is certainly at the top of that list. Jed, a little around campus here to get us started. As I tell you what, the baseball team, the WVU baseball team, after, I guess it's probably fair to call it a slower start to the season than they wanted. They were dealing with some injuries, had some things working against them, but they've gotten healthy at the right time. They've figured it out at the right time. The baseball team now back-to-back Big 12 sweeps, so playing really strong in the conference. Just beat Pitt this week as well, too. We always love that. 6-3 in front of over 4,600 people there in Morgantown, the largest home crowd in program history. And the Mountaineers are once again in the top 25, ranked 22nd this week. And I tell you what, with the win over Pitt and a couple more games here before the week closes down, they keep playing solid baseball. They might even be in the top 20 by the time the newest polls drop next week. So, Jed, some pretty cool stuff. And once again, much like we were this time last year, right? Like, yeah, we got the spring game, but football still feels far away, right? Basketball is now done and the winter's over and the sun's coming out. It's time to get behind this talented, this ranked, this WVU baseball team making some noise once again.
Yeah, as you touched on, slow start, injuries. I mean, it kind of impacts you when you have potentially the number one pick in the Major League Baseball amateur draft out, right? That
Correct. I think that's pretty significant.
Yeah, that's pretty significant. But it feels like it's all setting up. With Randy Mazey's swan song, what a story this could make. If, in fact, this turns out to be a season of epic and historic proportions, that would just be so fitting, so awesome on so many levels. We've said this before. When you think back to the days of the Atlantic 10 at Holly Field and, soggy outfield.
It's crazy.
This is big time baseball.
It's crazy.
Being played at the highest of levels in a big time baseball conference, and we're pacing the whole league.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great story, but I'll double back to what I said a minute ago. I just think that in Randy Mazey's final season, this would be pure magic to see this turn into something genuinely special that we can talk about for a generation. I really do think that'd be awesome. And so far, so good. I mean, we seem to be peaking. It's not quite the right time yet, but we're approaching the right time, right?
No doubt. No doubt.
So here we go.
Yeah, here we go. And you're absolutely right. I'm glad you said that too. Every time I think about where the baseball program is, and when I see the attendance record of over 4,600 people there, for a weeknight game as well too, I think back to those Halley Field days. I mean, I remember Randy Mazey's first year, I was still in college, and we played Pitt, and there were 600 people there. I mean, 500. Yeah. And that was a big crowd there at that time. It was like, must be playing Pitt, right? There's a couple hundred people here. To now, I mean, just what they've built, the facilities, the team being consistently one of the best programs in the Big 12. As you mentioned, a real chance to have the number one overall draft pick but certainly I think even if not the guy who is going to be drafted highest in program history in J.J. Weatherholt, that number currently 11th overall by Alek Manoah a few years ago to Toronto. So I got to think, listen, JJ might not go first, but I don't see him dropping out of the top 5. So, I mean, you're going to have a top 5 pick in the draft, all this success, Big 12 regular season champions, co-regular season champions last year. It's been a lot of fun. And you're right. This is the last year for Randy Mazey after, a dozen years at this thing. It would be very cool to see him make some more history here in these closing weeks and closing months.
And I know you can be perfectly objective with J.J. Weatherholt, because where did he go to high school?
Yes, he went to Mars High School, center of the universe, Mars, Pennsylvania.
Where'd you go to high school?
Where the first most notable alumni is David Bednar, the all-star closer for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Second most notable, Wesley Euler, co-host of the In the Gun podcast. But I think I'm going to be getting bumped here pretty soon for J.J. Weatherholt once he goes pro here in about June, whenever he hears his name called in the Major League Baseball draft. We are going to take a break here. When we come back on the other side, we'll talk a little spring game, some interesting news about maybe a new two-way athlete for the Mountaineers, some things to hit on as we are just a week away over from the spring game and the conclusion of spring practice. We'll talk a little spring ball on the other side. Wesley Euler, Jed Drenning, you are In the Gun.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less. In Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
ITG will be right back.
The Mountaineers took it out of his hands, and Darwin Cook is racing for a touchdown. How about that turnaround?
For nearly 20 years, Foris has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Foris offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Foris offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Foris is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Foris to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Foris has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Foris, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
If you work the land, you just got to be a jack of all trades type. There's just too much to do. So if you got to be a welder or a farmer or a ditch digger, that's just who you are that day. Then tomorrow, you can be somebody else.
Get your Coyote at the new location of Johnston Equipment between Weston and Buchanan.
Back in the gun here as we roll along on episode 156. A thank you to our friends at Foris and our guy Rick Lewis. I was actually just listen, Jed, you're not the only one who's text buddies with Rick Lewis, all right? I was actually just texting with him earlier this afternoon. So a big shout out to Rick Lewis and to Foris now.
Yes. Who's having dinner with Rick Lewis Tuesday night?
You
at the Greenbrier. Me and Owen.
And me, all right. I'll see you there. What time's dinner?
Join us, please do. Yeah,
well, it's a little bit further. It's a little bit further of a hike for me than it is for you two.
It's a home game for Owen.
To be fair, it's a home game.
I've got a meeting down there, and so I got a meeting like Wednesday, Thursday. Rick just happens to be in town, so because he lives in Colorado, so we're gonna hook up for dinner. And I texted Owen. I was like, dude.
It's awesome.
Rick's going to be in White Sulphur, so here he comes. So the three of us are going to be chatting it up, man. Yeah,
that's awesome. I'll have FOMO next week for sure. You'll have to make sure to send me some pictures. But yeah. we all know Foris. You got to check out best for roof performance and financial security guaranteed. Make sure you visit fortis.us.com. Jed, spring game April 27th, just a little over a week away. Saturday will be 1 week away. from the spring game, the conclusion always of spring practice. And some interesting news and notes that we got to hit on here just for a few minutes before we close down this edition of ITG. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think most notably, look out Travis Hunter, because here comes Rodney Gallagher III playing a little defense, playing a little both sides of the ball in spring football. Listen, I think a lot of times we kind of manufacture storylines this time of year just because we all want some football things to talk about, and it's kind of the nature of the content business. But this, to me, is actually a real intriguing storyline out of spring practice, not one that we have to kind of pretend to be excited about or anything like that. Rodney Gallagher, insane athlete, was a top basketball recruit when he was in high school as well, too. This could have some legs.
Could have some legs, and maybe the most entertaining part is how matter-of-factly Neil handled the whole thing. It was he kind of in the presser, it was almost like an "oh, by the way," and then had to double back and be asked about it again. But it makes good sense. First of all, let's frame this thing appropriately. We're talking about best case scenario. He's taking defensive reps at nickel corner. So he'd be very limited in terms of what he would need to know. It would be relying almost purely on his athleticism and skill. You're probably looking at, I think Neil attached the number, maybe 6 to 10 snaps a game, and that would be meaningful because it would be situational in a sub package.
Sure.
Travis Hunter, what makes him so freakish, and Neil addressed this as well, that kid's playing 120 snaps some games.
Insane.
It's insane what he's doing from a two-way standpoint. And Coach Brown also pointed out, this isn't his first rodeo with the two-way type player. He had a kid at Troy named Marcus Jones, who was by naturally a defensive back. He was a corner for him, but he got dinged up, and he came, and Neil saying, "Hey, put me in at receiver. I want to play." And I can, they realize you can protect yourself a little easier on offense than defense. And he had a shoulder issue.
Sure.
Well, he came in, and I went back and looked at it. He had 4 catches in that bowl win against Buffalo in Neil's final game at Troy. So he made the most of that opportunity. Yeah. So what I see with Rodney, I had a chance to watch him when he was at Laurel Highlands. I went up and watched him play, and it obviously stuck out as just what a natural, fluid athlete he is. And that's what we're talking about here. He's just so smooth and so natural that it takes a special type of kid to say, hey, switch sides of the ball for a few snaps. And why don't you do maybe the most difficult thing in all of sports and see if you can cover this talented guy in space and help us out defensively and give us a blow. And Neil talked about his basketball skills and how that translated. Well, the thing about it is, when you watched him in high school, he was a quarterback. We've talked about that many times. But that same fluid, smooth, natural ability is what helped him translate, I don't want to say seamlessly, to the receiver position, having never played it before at the college level, but more seamlessly than you would expect. Now he's trying to become more of a technician, take it to the next level, as we discussed in the previous episode, and see where it goes. But it's that same skill set, those same abilities that stand out in basketball, on the football field in high school, as a defensive back in high school, as a quarterback in high school. He's just a backyard baller. He has that it factor. It was almost impossible to watch him play in high school and not immediately notice that first, that it factor. Boy, I tell you what, you could toss any ball, any sport that kid's way, and he's just going to pick it up and quickly stand out.
Right. You give him a baseball bat, right, and give him a couple weeks, and he'll be one of the best guys out there.
He would figure it out. So to me, it's terribly exciting because look at this situationally. What might this look like? Again, we're gaming this out way down the road. Let's say against Penn State. He's continued this through the rest of spring. He's continued this through the summer. He continues to enhance this neat skill of going both ways. And he's ready for his 5, 6, 8, 10 snaps defensively. All right, well, when might it happen? Well, it's going to happen in a sub package. So it's not going to be a 1st and 10 in the red zone. It's going to happen on a 3rd and 8 with Penn State coming out on their own 30. That's what you're going to do with this. Right. And now, from a personnel standpoint, you can have your best players on the field defensively, even outside of Rodney playing nickel corner. That's really what it's doing. It's taking whatever you might view as, well, we have a guy that could play there, but there's a little more coverage deficiencies, whatever, to sneak somebody in for just a handful of snaps. You're not asking too much of him. The big thing is if the presentation changes, he has to be prepared. But that's why they still won't ask much of it. In other words, you could line up and say, hey, cover the slot. Well, the slot might go in motion. Trips might become quads. Trips might become doubles. I mean, you don't know if somebody's going to become peeling out of the backfield. Now, who knows what might happen? So you have to make it as simple as possible, especially out of the gate, and not ask much of him, which they aren't, and just let him use his natural athletic ability to provide some sort of advantage for you defensively. So I think it's an awesome potential story. I think it's something with an excited eye, monitor it as we continue down the stretch, as we come closer and closer to the season. But if you can do it, I mean, 5 to 10 snaps a game doesn't sound like much, but when you do the math, if you're talking 65, 70 slugs a game defensively, sometimes 80 if you're playing Texas Tech, that adds up because that's 5 or 10 less than somebody else has to play. So that's 5 or 10 snaps towards somebody else being that much fresher late in a game. So yeah, that kind of contribution could be very meaningful if he continues that trajectory. And I just think it's a fun story. All of a sudden, a 3rd and 8 may take on a whole new dimension with the crowd when you see number 2 trot out there. That's the other question I have. You got to watch out Aubrey Burks being on the field with Rodney Gallagher because remember, we have a 2 on offense, a 2 on defense.
Oh, geez, that's a good point. Someone's got to change the number here.
He might have to change the number. Yeah, Rodney will go out there wearing 99 playing nickel corner.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. No, it's intriguing, and you're right. Those snaps are significant. I mean, if you just look at it, hey, say it's 7 snaps in a game where the defense plays 70 snaps. I mean, that's 10% of the snaps, right? I mean, that's not insignificant there. That's a number that has effect, as you mentioned, for everybody else in terms of keeping their reps down, keeping them fresher. And then I think just too, I mean, the opportunity for Rodney to really have an impact and to use that talent and that skill set that we've talked about. I think there's a lot to like here. He is a guy who is just an athlete, like you mentioned. I mean, he's one of those guys, like if he's never golfed before, give him a set of golf clubs and give him a week and he'll be out there looking like he's been golfing for a few years. Like, he never played ping pong before. Give him a little table tennis racket in a couple days and he'll be beating everybody, right?
You know what I like about it, Wes? What I like about it is it instills a certain element of quiet pride when you do something different. Like Coach Rod was very good at doing these types of things. Doing something that nobody else did that was different and unique, and we all took pride in it because it was different. Whether it was a rugby kick, whether it was an odd stack defense, whatever it might be, different things. Well, I remember back when the Steelers had Cordell as slash. He might only play 8, 10 snaps of slash, but those were 8 to 10 really cool snaps that brought a whole new energy to that offense. I mean, look at Charles Woodson. You're too young to remember this, but when he won the Heisman, he didn't take a lot of offensive snaps from Michigan, but when he did,
he took enough.
Man, the crowd was energized and into it, and it just brings a new excitement for a very small price. And let's double back and say this: it's still a critical learning interval for Rodney as a receiver. The staff's very smart about this. If on any level they felt this would impair his trajectory to continue to learn at that position, what's first and foremost, Neil is completely crystal clear about this. He's an offensive player. This will not impair his growth as an offensive player at all, or they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't even tinker with it. But I like the fact that when you do things that have a wrinkle, it just energizes all those around you. The defense will have a certain energy to it when he steps onto the field for a 3rd and 7. The crowd will have a certain energy to it when he steps. I just think the whole thing has incredible potential on every level for a dozen reasons.
Completely agree. That's something we'll certainly keep an eye on, and we'll certainly have an eye open for. See if we see RG3, our RG3. Getting any snaps on the defensive side of the football during the spring game a little over a week from today. Jed, anything else you wanted to hit on before we close this down as it relates to spring ball rolling along here?
The question becomes, as we're immersed in the portal until the end of April in this spring portal window, okay, what positions might we pursue? Well, let's check and see. I do think that we were kind of in the market for a defensive lineman. We had an injury with Corey McIntyre, who was having an incredible camp. So stay tuned in terms of the impact of that energy and how significant it will be. But you were already in the market anyway,
right,
for another piece of the defensive line. We like to talk at great length about this linebacker position potentially being a strength on the defensive side. We're happy with where we are on the secondary. I think we're happy where we are with the defensive line, but it's a question of depth. So, I mean, when you look at some of the names, whether it's Sean Martin, I expect big things out of him. Eddie V's having the type of camp and about to take a step. You've heard the staff talk about him potentially developing into a all Big 12 caliber player. And I mean, I've seen him do things in the past, Wes, as a boundary tackle, making 3 or 4 tackles in that Tech game. Like when he turns that switch, which really that switch with Eddie V is always on, he's a contributor. TJ Jackson is a very exciting addition to me. I think on the interior, see, that's the thing with Corey. Corey's one of those big bodies that don't grow on trees. So he was holding down the nose. He was one of those 3 primaries holding down the nose. Of course, for Torma Malba, 300-pounder. Hammond Russell's having a great camp. So, Nate Gabriel, if in fact we're looking for that type of depth, I think he's going to have to steal some snaps, and Neil's talked about that too. But somebody's going to have to provide some element of depth on the defensive line because it does seem like the rest of the defense might be coming together. But stay tuned on the Corey McIntyre injury and stay tuned on the portal. But I think D-line at least is one spot that we would try and address irrespective of what does or doesn't play out with Corey McIntyre.
Well, it is Drew Fabianich season. Our guy Drew, good friend of the show here. And so, yeah, Jed, in this portal era, right, depth is the hardest thing now to have, to achieve, to maintain, to build because, kids don't want to stay and grow and develop. They want to go and they want to play and they want to get paid. So we all know depth is always, it's something at the forefront of everybody's conversations right now in this era. But having said that, I feel more confident with us navigating this than ever before, coming off the season that we just were, with the culture that seems to be there, that has really taken time to build up, but is certainly the labor behind that has started to bear fruit. And then again, having Drew with his hand in the pile and kind of overseeing all of, not just his hand in the pile, being the hand that moves the pile. I feel, listen, things are going to happen. They always do, but I feel much more confident. I feel much better about these upcoming weeks than years past.
It's a new normal.
Yeah.
I mean, Matt Moore made the point. Look, if you have a redshirt sophomore on the offensive line, if he's not starting, he's probably gone.
I mean, everyone's struggling for depth.
Normal development. I mean, that's the new normal across college football. You are going to lose kids in both portal windows. So you're just going to have to address it accordingly on the fly. It's nice to have a much more stable situation, a better understanding of how to approach that. And I think the building's in great hands from Neil on down to the scouting department. I think we're in the best spot that we have been since this college football 2.0, as we always call it, really started.
Completely agree. A final thank you before we go here to our friends at Johnston Equipment. Make sure you're checking out their new location, Route 33. Just outside of Weston. That'll do it for this edition of ITG, but keep your eyes and your ears locked and loaded because we might just have another edition of Who Wants to Be a Mountaineer coming at you any day now. We will obviously have another full episode next week as well, too, as we look ahead to the spring game and the end of the month of April and the conclusion of spring practice. So before we go, the one thing we ask of you, as always, is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. For the Signal Caller, Jed Drenning, I'm Wesley Euler. Thanks to our guy Skyler for putting this together for us, as always, producing it all. You've been in the gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.